look at that. You got a little LED sign back there as well. I like it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Rich, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Not too shabby. How's Florida?
It's nice and warm.
Yeah.
You know?
We're getting pretty cold here.
It's freezing in Cleveland?
Yeah, it's a rainy, gloomy day right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Got a lot of friends in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah? You been up here before?
Yeah, I was there about 10 years ago for a buddy's 50th birthday.
Nice.
Last time I haven't spent much time there, but yes, you better be nice to me because I know people.
I like it.
They all used to be wrestlers, so they could, they could beat you up.
Man. We'll try to stay on your good graces.
Yes.
But I think they're scared of dogs, so you might be safe if you got dogs around.
Awesome. Well, listen, Rich, I know we've interacted back and forth a handful of times just in the comments section, obviously on YouTube videos and stuff. Looks like you've been training dogs for a while. So let's go ahead and start off. Just kind of give us a little background on yourself. I mean, what's your training background and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I like to say I've been working with pet dogs for about 50 years, but most of that's not as a professional dog trainer. I've done some of that off and on and worked for other people, but I think the way I really started working with pet dogs, believe it or not, was probably around 1980. I was in college. And I got a summer job selling encyclopedias door to door. And I quickly realized I could, every young couple that I would present a pitch to would, have a dog. And none of them had control of their dogs. And I couldn't do my hour-and-a-half sales presentation with posters all over the living room.
Sure.
With the dog running around going crazy because, they wouldn't listen to you. You couldn't make a sale.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how I did it. I don't even remember how I came up with it, but I somehow figured out this, necessity being the mother of invention, how to control other people's dogs in about two minutes. Mm-hmm. I'd walk in, total stranger. They didn't know I was coming. I was just knocking on their door cold. And they've had the dog for 5 years and have no control over it. And in about 2 minutes, I'd have control of the dog so I could do my pitch. So that's, and that was about 20 years before Cesar Millan got on TV and started talking about no touch, no talk, no eye contact.
Yep.
But it works.
Yeah. Was that kind of some of the, what sorts of things did you do, if you recall, when you were going in to help make that more manageable, the situation?
Well, that's exactly what I did. I ignored the dog.
Yep.
In other words, at some point I realized that if I didn't acknowledge the dog, and whether you call this, alpha behavior or whatever you want to call it, but I've noticed whether it be with dogs or a wolf pack or whatever, or even like my wife, who's the alpha in our house, and I'm talking about with the dog.
Sure, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Our 140-pound Great Pyrenees.
Yeah.
They watch you. You don't watch them. If you want to be the leader,
sure,
you just do your thing and they'll follow you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you're looking at the dog, you're not the leader. And that's the same thing with like a pack of wolves or a bunch of dogs. So I would go in and ignore the dog, and it was like I had a force field around myself that even if the dog came running up to jump on me, he might do that one little jump, but then I wouldn't even look at him. I would act like he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And the dog would be like, oh, this is different. And he'd just go sit down and settle down and be quiet, and I'd do. And it was funny because the customers would think I didn't like dogs or something because I was ignoring their dog.
Yeah.
And I'd explain, no, this is so we can, you notice he's well behaved for the first time in his life. This is so we can get through the presentation. And then when I'm done and I'm leaving, I'm going to have a party with your dog. But if I do that now, then we're done.
Yeah.
The force field is broken, and that's the end of my sales pitch. So.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing. I grew up with dogs. We had 300 acres in South Carolina when I was a kid. Mostly hunting dogs, mostly labs. In fact, my first dog I got when I was 3 years old, granddaddy gave me a lab puppy. He was a big duck hunter, so we had a lot of black labs. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was 4, an alligator had eaten it. So that's what happened to my first dog.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah.
That's life on 300 acres, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, well, they like to swim, those black labs, and that's where the alligators are.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the ignoring dog things is such a it's such a wild concept, right? Because it's so simple, right? And it's something anybody can do. And so much of the reason why people struggle with their dogs, I feel like, is because of the associations that they create, right? Whether it's what happens when people come over, what happens when they take their dog somewhere, when they go out on the walk, all those types of things. We create all these patterns and all these associations that just cause our dogs to get just constantly wired every time they see somebody or anything because they're going to get something out of it, right? So the second somebody comes into the house,
you're always training your dog, even when you don't intend to.
Yeah, so much of it is the things that's happening outside of when you're actually quote unquote training the dog. You know what I mean? People get so hung up on the obedience commands and stuff, but it's like, what are you doing when you live with the dog that's causing all these associations to be that way? So
yeah, I'm happy to hear you say that because that's my whole thing. Is that I have a video I made called "Dog Training is Overrated."
Sure.
Which is a funny thing for a dog trainer to say.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it's ignorance. My whole thing is, the reason I'm going to start, or I guess I've already started off-grid dogs. The idea behind the name is to get your dog off the grid, out of the matrix, and to fight the pet industrial complex. Because they make $70 billion a year in this country, maybe more than that. That's an old number, probably. From dogs. And they sell the lie of convenience. Anybody can have a dog. It's very convenient. You don't have to train them or walk them, or you can feed them kibble. Everything that they sell is based on ignorance. So that's why I kind of had to start my own companies. I don't think any dog trainer that I could find would hire me, which I would much prefer to work for a guy like you and just spend my senior years having a good time helping people with their dogs.
Sure.
I didn't want to start a business. By the way, congratulations. You seem to be doing very well.
Appreciate that.
I admire people that can run a small business successfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'd get fired right away if I went to work for another dog training company because they wouldn't like my message so much.
Yeah, and elaborate on that. Like, what do you think? Some of the biggest difference between the way that you look at training versus like much of the dog training world, or the people you're referring to when you say you think you would get fired right away?
And let me preface that with just saying that I understand why you have to sell convenience, because if you just hit people in the head with the truth, you're not going to have any customers.
Sure.
But it's sort of like I came up with the thing out of necessity when I was 20 years old on how to control other people's dogs so I could do a sales pitch. And then 20 years later, I saw this guy on TV named Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, talking about no touch, no talk, no eye contact. I said, hey, that's true. That works.
Yeah.
Well, I came up with a thing, and I really kind of refined it about 7 years ago when my wife got a Great Pyrenees. I don't know how familiar you are with livestock guardians, or you train many of those. I'm sure you have.
Very familiar. We have a Pyrenees in right now for a board and train, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want one. I wanted a black lab. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably familiar with Stoney Dennis. He always says every dog wants to be a lab and every lab wants to be a black lab.
Yeah.
But because they're easy, they're fun, they're just nice dogs.
Sure.
But so when she got this Great Pyrenees, I was like, oh boy, I better do some research because I wasn't that real familiar with livestock guardian. And what I tried to do at the time was figure out how can I arrange, because we don't have a mountain full of sheep for him to guard, which is what they've been bred for thousands of years to do, is to be left alone with the family's entire net worth under their care and supervision. While the shepherd goes home and sleeps, the dog is, protecting the sheep and making all of his own decisions, not working with a human or being told what to do by a human.
Yep.
So I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. And so what I tried to do, since I couldn't provide the dog with what he was bred for thousands of years to do, and I mean literally thousands because it's a primitive breed. They're not like a German Shepherd that was invented a couple hundred years ago.
Sure.
So their genetics is so much stronger than any dog I've ever seen. and labs and German Shepherds have strong genetics too, but
Sure.
Nothing like a livestock guardian.
Yeah.
So I tried to arrange things, just little things I could do so the dog could have a fulfilling life. And I could give you lots of examples for things that we do with them, but just one example would be, I do the opposite of what most dog trainers will tell you to do. But I can do this because, again, there's no question on who the leader is or who's in charge. If I need to be in charge on the walk, if I need him to come back to me and heel, he'll do that. But generally, when I take him for a walk, I try to let him make all the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had a German Shepherd, I wouldn't do that.
Sure. Why not?
But he's not a German Shepherd. And I feel like it's one of the reasons why we've had zero behavior problems in 7 years. We got him when he was 7 weeks old. Now he's 7 years old. You hear about all the behavior problems they have, barking too much and all these things. But just little things you can do so that your dog is getting fulfilled and he's not. Basically, it's the opposite of what many people do with their dogs, is they drive their dogs crazy. Mm-hmm. Because the dog doesn't get anything it needs. And one of my videos that I made was called "What Are Your Dog's Needs?" Because I look around and every pet owner I see is fulfilling almost none of them. And dogs are very forgiving. You don't have to be perfect. If you just meet them halfway, you'll have a pretty damn good dog.
Sure.
But when you're not doing anything right, you're doing everything wrong. Mm-hmm. It's like I said one time, if you had a friend come over to your house and they walked in the door and they said hello, and your teenager came running out of the bedroom and jumped on them and started scratching them and screaming at them, you probably would think there was a problem. Like maybe your teenager's got an issue or something. But our dogs do that all the time, and that's just the way he is.
Yeah, he's just a dog.
No, that's not the way. That's the way he is living with you.
Yes.
Because you've driven him nuts.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, all these dogs, all they get is excitement and affection. They don't get any calm or any leadership or any anything that they need.
Yeah. So moving back to you were saying, obviously, on the walk, you give the dog quite a bit of ability to make his own decisions, which I fully support that. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of, once you have control of your dog, like you said, if you need to get him to come back and heel with you, you have the ability to do so. There's no concerns that you don't have control over the dog, obviously. But once we've established that control, we want to allow them to be dogs. We want to allow them to make some of their own choices and, enjoy themselves and all of that. But you mentioned, obviously, with a German Shepherd, you wouldn't do that, right? So elaborate on that. Why would you allow, let's say, a livestock guardian dog, an Anatolian, right, a Pyrenees, something like that, to make more decisions on their own, but you wouldn't allow a German Shepherd to do that?
Well, it's not that I wouldn't let the German Shepherd do anything, but the reason I would approach a German Shepherd differently than a livestock guardian is because if you've ever worked with the two breeds, you realize that they're completely different.
Very different.
Mentally.
Yes.
It is completely different. I mean, the German Shepherd is happy as hell. The more commands, more training you do, more obedience, whatever. The German Shepherd loves it. Mm-hmm. When you start trying to do that with a Great Pyrenees, it's hilarious. They look at you like, you want me to do what? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I'll think about that and I'll get back to you if I think it's a good idea. Because they already know what to do.
Sure.
That's what they were bred for thousands of years, to make their own decisions. Mm-hmm. It's just night and day.
Yeah.
But, and as I developed this, philosophy or whatever you want to call it, of it's kind of a holistic approach to dog training, and that I once again, I discovered somebody else who had described it better than I do, so I steal their description. I'll give credit, though, where it's due.
Sure.
Are you familiar with a guy named Jay Jack?
Yeah. Yeah, I went to one of his seminars a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I by the way, talk about a funny guy and an entertaining guy. That's a guy who should have one. He's hilarious.
Yeah, he's a character.
He is. But and I don't think he invented this either. And he's got, I don't know if you know Chad Mackin.
Yep.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah, Chad Mackin.
I don't think either one of them created this, but they may have, or they got it from somebody else. But are you familiar with the layered stress model?
Yes, but go ahead and refresh me a little bit on it.
Picturing a volcano. So the layered stress model, this is what I was doing when I started trying to create a life for my Great Pyrenees that would allow him to be fulfilled and not, I didn't want a 140-pound dog that can kill everybody in the room in 10 seconds,
sure,
to be walking around half insane. Well, I came across this layered stress model. So what it purports is that, let's say your wife comes home from work and you've been cooking a meatloaf for her for dinner, and you sit down to eat, and she cuts into her meatloaf, and it's a little bit undercooked, just a little bit. And she immediately screams, and she throws the meatloaf across the room.
Okay.
You're not going to say, okay, we need to counter condition this woman.
Sure.
So we're going to show her uncooked meatloaf or undercooked meatloaf and give her bowls of ice cream.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're going to desensitize her. So we're going to show her meatloaf that's just a little bit undercooked and then a little bit more undercooked.
Sure.
No, we wouldn't do that. We'd ask her, honey, what the hell is up? What happened today?
Yeah.
Did your boss fire you? Did you get somebody die? Why are you crazy? Yeah. So why do we not do that with dogs? Well, this layered stress model basically says that there's certain things a dog needs to not be totally stressed out. Let's say that your dog is reactive walking on the leash when it sees another dog walk by. That's the most common thing, right?
Sure.
So let's say that strange dog walking by is worth 10 points of stress. And if you look at the layered stress model diagram, it's like a volcano blowing its stack when it gets to 100 points. So if your dog is walking around with 95 points of stress all the time because of all the needs are not being met,
yeah,
it's not going to take much to put him over that 100-point threshold.
Yeah.
And so when he sees that strange dog, even though it's only 10 points of stress, that's going to put him over 100. He's going to blow its stack and freak out. So you look at 5 things, basically. The foundation of it is health.
Sure.
Most of our dogs in America are not healthy.
Yep.
We feed them kibble. You guys ever seen a documentary called Pet Food?
Yeah.
If somebody watches that documentary, they'll never walk into a big chain store and look at dog food the same way again.
Sure.
It's amazing. But even worse than that, we neuter them, we spay them, so they've lost a big part of their endocrine system to begin with. And then from there, we probably don't give them enough exercise and so forth. So if a dog's not healthy or anybody's not healthy, if you and I are not healthy, we're not going to be very well behaved if we're feeling bad all the time.
Yep. You're not.
It's hard to be in a good mood when you're just, it causes stress. Being unhealthy causes stress. And then the second thing would be the biological life that the dog is living. If he's a German Shepherd, does he have a job? Is he, getting that working, instinct satisfied?
Yeah.
Or if he's a Great Pyrenees, is he, outside surveying the landscape all the time?
Yeah.
That's what makes my dog happy. Just sitting out in the yard watching over the neighbor. He loves that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever things you can do to people don't walk their dogs. This is a huge thing that drives me crazy, is that they think the backyard is fine. I always say the backyard is a dungeon.
Yeah.
It's the same old smells. You're probably letting him, you might go out there and play with him once in a while, but most of the time he's probably out there by himself.
Yeah.
That's not what dogs were meant to do. Dogs were meant to walk with their pack.
Yeah.
And they're meant to follow. Basically, most dogs are not dominant leader type dogs. They're meant to follow somebody. So that's why, people that walk their dogs have very well behaved dogs. And I don't mean, people say, oh yeah, I walk my dog 3 times a day. How long do you walk him? 10 minutes. That's not a walk. I'm sorry, 10 minutes is like a pee break.
Yep.
It takes about 30 minutes for you and the dog to even, both of you, and it's addictive because when you get good at it, like I'm in a bad mood if I don't get to walk my dog at least an hour,
Sure.
Every day. Right? That's my favorite hour of the day because I'm just with my dog. I'm not on my phone. I'm just chilling out and I'm communicating with my dog without saying a word. We don't talk. We just communicate because dogs don't speak English. And it's so relaxing. It's addictive, But, so yeah, that's the second layer of the layered stress model is the lifestyle of your dog. Are you giving any of its lifestyle needs being met?
Yep.
And then the third thing would be, what is the third thing? I'm drawing a blank. Oh, the most important thing, probably clarity. How many dogs in America are stressed out because their owner's yelling at them all the time and the dog has no idea what the owner's talking about?
Yep.
And the owner's talking to him all the time, so the dog is like, is he just babbling again or is that a command? What am I supposed to do?
Yep.
There's no clarity. There's no communication. The people don't learn how to speak dog and they don't understand the dog doesn't speak English.
Yep.
So that, of course, stresses you out because we all like to have clarity. Try taking your wife or your girlfriend to a party and not telling her what kind of a party it is, how everybody else is going to be dressed, what is she supposed to bring. Because I was just going to a party. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
She's going to be stressed. She's going to be like, well, how do I dress? I don't know what to do. She's not going to like it. Dogs are the same way. So they need clarity. They need that communication.
Yeah.
And then the fourth thing is the leash. Teaching the dog the leash because there's nothing more unnatural to ask a dog to do than to walk on a leash.
Yep.
They walk at 5 miles an hour. We walk at 2 miles an hour.
Yep.
Their social bubble's about 100 yards and ours is about 100 inches.
Yep.
If somebody's more than 5 feet away from you, you don't even really try to talk to them. They're too far away, right? Dog doesn't look back to see if you're still there until he's about 200 or 300 feet away.
Yep.
So, if you teach the dog and yourself to master the leash, and if your dog gets excited and is happy when he sees the leash come off the wall, that's going to lower his stress. And then the fifth thing is the actual trigger. So if you do these four things, if you do all of them, not expect anybody to do any of them perfectly, but if you do them a little bit better, and your dog, instead of being at 95 points of stress, is only at 60 points of stress, then when he sees that strange dog and it's worth 10 points, he's only up to 70, he doesn't even do anything. He just walks on by, doesn't react.
Well, I think, like you were just saying, it's not that you have to perfect every single one of them. I mean, that's, with the world we live in, the lives we live, stuff like that, it's going to be very, very challenging to do. But being mindful of those four things and looking at, like, all right, well, which one of these can I put a little bit of emphasis into over the next month, over the next 2 months, right? Like health, for example. Obviously, you brought up a lot of examples relating to the diets that we're feeding them and all that kind of stuff, which are very important, But one of the ones that I always tell people is just, when I see dogs that come in that are overweight, free-fed, right, constantly gorging themselves with food, stuff like that, I always equate it to, like, if you overeat and, eat McDonald's and stuff like that every single day of your life for the next 3 weeks, like, you're going to feel awful. Your body's not designed to work optimally, when you're constantly full, right? I always think that there's a degree of, you should be a little bit hungry at all times, right? Your body should be kind of in this mode where you're, if you get back to the biological fulfillment of things, they're hunting, in this mindset of, I need to work and hunt to try to find my next meal, stuff like that. And just getting your feeding schedule under control with your dog. There's so many dogs I've seen that have like anxiety issues and stuff, that you get them on a good feeding routine. You don't forget switching the food and all of that. Just feeding them an appropriate amount of food, putting them on a diet, that alone, you notice such a freaking massive change in their behavior. Like dogs that are 4 years old that act like they're 10 years old suddenly become like puppies again. They have all this energy and they want to romp around and play and just be dogs, right? That's such a big one. The biological fulfillment side of things, super, super, super important. Obviously, so many people are getting dogs that they just think look cool, like say a German Shepherd or, a Pyrenees or whatever it may be. And they have no idea what those dogs are designed to do. And then they live in a box for their entire life, which is, their house. And, you mentioned the walk, right? The walk is important, but arguably the way people walk their dogs, not even from a standpoint of the training or the healing or anything, but just, they do their lap around the neighborhood and then they go back home, whether it's an hour, whether it's 10 minutes, you know, your dog is still trapped within the confines of just that neighborhood. Like, I think past just going for long walks, I think dogs are designed to explore and see new places. And, you know, one thing I always try to do with
take them with you.
Yeah.
They're pack animals. They want to go with you.
Yeah, and that's twofold, right? One, it's biologically fulfilling them. It's mentally fulfilling them because they're experiencing new things. And two, you're eliminating this, like, novelty of anywhere outside of the house in the neighborhood is just so new, and I don't know how to handle myself in that situation, right? Where the more places you take them, even if it's once a month you go to a new park or a new neighborhood or something like that to walk around, you know, the novelty of that wears off, and they're not going to be so overstimulated when you take them into those environments. You know, that's
absolutely. I mean, that's how you get a bulletproof dog, is
yeah,
through socialization, not the wrong kind of socialization. People think it's meeting every person and every dog that walks by. Is really the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like our dog's never eaten anything cooked in his entire life. But a raw diet, which is what we feed, even though it's the healthiest possible diet, it's also too expensive and too difficult and too complicated for the average person to realistically do.
Yeah.
But there's a vet I recommend, Dr. Karen Becker on YouTube. You've probably heard of her, right?
Yep.
She has a list of 15 diets for dogs. The number one is what we do, which is a raw diet. The worst diet, number 15, is a raw diet done incorrectly. Because that'll make your dog sick.
Yeah.
You can't just feed them chicken.
No,
you gotta
add the calcium,
do a lot of
and you gotta add the
variety, and
all the different supplements.
do a lot of research. But in between there, she gives people some great alternatives without going to the extreme that most people can't do.
Sure.
Instead of just kibble, which is like one of the worst things.
Yeah.
And I can give you an example of something that I've seen works really well. Even if you're going to keep your dog on kibble, if you reduce it by 25%, and by the way, never free feed. That's a whole other conversation.
Yep.
But you reduce that kibble 25% and give them some sardines, some raw eggs, and some blueberries. And they did a study of this, and the average dog lived 2 years longer.
Yep.
Just by doing that.
Sure. Yeah.
Even though you're still feeding them kibble.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But yeah.
I think that's huge.
Just kibble alone is so bad, but
yeah. I mean, every single one of these is very important, right? Then you get into clarity, right? I tell people this all the time. Like, anytime we see dogs, like, we're working with the dog, and let's say the dog starts getting a little stressed out from something, 9 out of 10 times it has nothing to do with the motivator or the punisher that you're using. It has to do with the fact that they just don't understand what it is we're asking them to do. You know, you eliminate all those types of things, and it's like, well, the way you asked this in this moment is completely different than right after that, which was completely different than right after that, which is completely different than right after that.
The consistency is one of the best ways to get the clarity.
Yeah, sure. The expectation is obviously constantly changing, right? And then leashes, I mean, obviously leashes, fences, any sort of barriers, stuff like that. Those are just completely foreign, man-made things dogs do not understand. And they could pose a lot of issues. So getting back to you know, how we kind of started this conversation a little bit. You know, we were talking about the Great Pyrenees, the German Shepherd. You know, it's interesting. You were saying, you know, German Shepherds, right? What they're designed for, they like working, right? They want to be responding to you and functioning and stuff like that. That breed is very interesting because we see, I would say German Shepherd is probably the number 2 breed that we have come in with like really serious behavioral issues. Right behind pit bulls, only because there's so many pit bulls here. I think that's the reason why that one's compounded so much.
Sure. Yeah, they're so popular.
Yeah, but German Shepherds is right behind it with the biggest issues I see. And it's interesting because I think a lot of times we look at German Shepherds and we think this dog needs a job, right? We need to get it, you know, again, working. We need to get it into scent detection work or agility or whatever it winds up being to try to kind of like biologically fulfill them a little bit. Where I find sometimes it kind of shoots you in the foot a little bit, where the more you're cooping up the dog through doing all these types of things, getting the dog working in a way where it's like everything is done in a very controlled fashion. You know what I mean? Because they're constantly working and they don't ever get that ability to go off and learn how to properly make their own decisions and just kind of let loose with things. That can cause massive problems. Where some of the best turnarounds that we have with German Shepherds that we find is when we could, again, establish that control initially and then allow them to be free, make their own decisions, and just learn proper behavior outside of all of the control. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. One thing that drives me nuts is, like people, I made a video about how dog trainers laugh at the flexi leash, or the, what do you call that?
Yeah, the retractable, the flexi.
Retractable leash, right? And my comeback to that is, well, it's good enough for Ivan Balabanov. He's the world champion.
That's true.
So if he doesn't think it's stupid, then I'm okay using one.
Yeah.
But just not letting your dog sniff. If you keep your dog on a heel the whole time you're walking your dog, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a German Shepherd or a Great Pyrenees or what it is, 90%, not 90, but 70% of your dog's brain is for his nose.
Yep.
And it's just so unnatural for a dog not, he's stuck in the house all day. There's nothing new to smell. And then you're going to go for a walk and you're going to keep him in a heel the whole time, not let him sniff anything. That's just like torture.
Sure.
That's not fulfilling for any dog. Let him use his nose. He's using his brain. He'll get tired, but he'll get tired in a good way.
Sure.
They'll get tired either way. I believe they'll get tired if you keep them in a heel because it's so stressful, it tires them out, but that's tiring them in a bad way.
Yeah.
It's non-fulfilling. But if you let them sniff a lot, then they're going to be tired, but they're going to be fulfilled. It's like a content, happy tired.
Yeah.
Which is going to give you much better behavior.
What do you think the balance is, right? Because I think there was a book that came out, in the last couple of years that was talking about different things we could do to elongate our dogs' lives and provide better fulfillment and stuff. And that's where I think the sniffy, they call it like the sniffy walks and stuff like that, really started rising in popularity, right? But the problem I find myself in is we have clients come in that are like, we either read this book or read this thing that talks about how sniffing walks, you got to be doing sniffing walks with your dogs to fulfill them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they try to go down that route and do that, and their behavioral issues just get worse over time because they have no control over the dog still. So now they're allowing the dog to make all their own decisions by giving them the breaks to do these sniffy walks, and it's just getting worse because they're making bad decisions and we don't have a way to influence them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the balance of providing that without shooting yourself in the foot of now I just really have no control over my dog in a really busy environment or at the park or whatever it may be?
Sure. Well, I think this is where, it's like anything else, really, it's complex. And we don't live in a world that does well with complexity. Everything's a TikTok video nowadays.
Yeah.
But, if you start, and it's like anything else, if you build a foundation, assuming, let's say, you get a dog as a puppy and not an older dog or a rescue. If you do everything generally right, you don't have to be perfect again, but if you do a lot of things right as that puppy's going through different stages, just little things like one of the first things I'll ask the client is, about a young dog or a puppy is, which rooms in the house do you allow them in? And I always get a blank stare, and they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, you don't allow them to run through the whole house, do you? And they go, yeah. And I already knew that how they were gonna answer the question before I asked it, because I could see from the dog that, there's no structure, there's no leadership, there's nothing. But there's little simple things people can do. As balance trainers, the other side tries to portray us as, the bad guys, or they try to portray dominance and alpha and all this stuff as evil, and you're mean to the dog and you're aggressive and dominating the dog. And that's not what it is at all. They misrepresent what that is. Because if you look at the dog world, if you look at the leader dog, he's not beating up on the other dogs, just the opposite.
Yep.
He's just got the calmest, most confident energy. And the other dogs are following him willingly, not because he's forcing them to or something. But a little thing like, with my dog, when he was a puppy, I took a couple of rooms, 2 or 3 rooms away from him. And I didn't do it by fencing him off, and I didn't do it by yelling at him. I didn't say a word. All I did was, when he tried to walk into, let's say, my office, that was one of the rooms I didn't let him go into. When he tried to walk in there as a puppy, I just stood at the doorway and just used energy, spatial pressure, whatever you want to call it, and said, no, this is not for you. You don't come in here. And he understood that right away. Dogs are not stupid if you speak to them in dog. And later on, he could be getting the zooming around the house, like totally out of his mind. And if he came toward that doorstep, he would just slam on the brakes because he knew he was not allowed to cross that threshold into that room.
Yep.
And when you do a few things like this, there's no question on who the leader is, or, you know, it's the other big simple mistake that they make, most dog owners, is giving commands that they can't enforce. If you give a command and you can't enforce it, then your dog knows you can blow you. You just trained your dog to blow you off.
Yep.
You trained your dog that I don't have to respect this guy.
Yep.
Or this girl.
Yep.
So it's as simple as, I'm not going to tell the dog to sit or to come or whatever command it is, unless I have a way of backing it up to make sure that I can follow through and he doesn't get away with not doing it. Because you're always training your dog.
Yep.
Most of the time people are training their dog, you know, to not obey.
Yep.
But they don't realize it.
So getting back to, the original question, obviously, you know, what's the balance of giving the dog the freedom out on the walks, obviously, without shooting yourself in the foot? If I put him in these situations, I give him the freedom and I have no control, is what you're saying, you know, during the dog's life, prior to putting them in that position to like be free and make all their own choices in those areas, that you establish some degree of control so that, you know, if you do.
Yeah, there's always a degree. Like, for example, when I say I let my dog make all of his decisions on the walk, he doesn't make all of them because I'm not going to let him run out in front of a car and get hit.
Yep.
But I just mean that I let him, you know, like if he smells something interesting across the street, he'll tell me that he wants to cross the street by sitting down.
Yeah.
He'll just sit down and look at me, and I'll go, okay, go ahead, cross the street, Taboo, and we'll cross the street. But, you know, obviously you can't do that if you have no control of your dog.
Yep.
So you've got to do that first. You've got to get the relationship fixed, so that you're not worried about, okay, who thinks they're the boss here. If that's a concern, then you're going to have a hard time letting your dog run around with a 25-foot flexi lead like I do.
Yeah.
Another great thing about those leads, by the way, is, you know, if you're old like me and you can't jog with your dog, what I can do, when he stops to sniff, I just keep walking and I get 25 feet ahead of him. And as soon as he marks that spot, I start walking as fast as I can away from him.
It jogs up. Yeah.
So then he'll go zooming by me.
Yep.
And he's got 25 feet to catch me, then 25 feet to get ahead of me.
Yep.
And he's very polite. He knows exactly how long the leash is, so he stops when he gets to the end of the leash.
Yeah.
Thank God, because he's a lot stronger than I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, he gets about 100 feet probably because I'm walking at the same time.
Yep.
Of jogging, and every time he stops to sniff, I give him a nice jogging opportunity.
Yep.
But yeah, it's different with every dog as far as finding a balance. But the main important thing to me is, you know, getting that relationship with the dog. If you don't have the dog's trust and you don't have the dog's respect, and that's the thing, it works both ways. Like, I can trust my dog.
Yep.
I mean, this may sound nuts, but I'll go into like a Home Depot just for fun, and I usually don't walk him on a flexi leash if I'm taking him to a restaurant or a Home Depot or something. I usually have him on a regular lead, but once in a while I'll put him on a flexi leash, and I'll let him walk about 10 or 15 feet out ahead of me, because I know he's not going to jump on anybody. I know he's not going to attack anybody else's dog, so I can give him that freedom. It's a stupid thing to do, admittedly, but it's fun to watch people's reaction when he turns the corner by himself, because, you know, I'm behind him so nobody sees me.
Sure. And
they just see this thing that can eat them come around the corner. They think it's a polar bear.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
The reptile brain kicks in for a second because it recognizes that can kill me.
So So it's interesting, right? So,
but then they see the sweet face and they relax, you know. So I'm not scaring anybody too badly.
yeah. So I'm in like total agreement with everything you're saying. Like obviously, like we talked about, the way we live with dogs is so flawed currently, and that's a lot of the reason why we're having so many problems with our dogs, right? And that's the reason why dog training is booming as an industry right now, is because as the world shifts and becomes more dog friendly, you know, now these people that already have a bad relationship with their dog are going more places with their dog that they have a bad relationship with, and they're exposing them to new triggers, and things are compounding and just getting worse and worse and worse, right? So
Right.
the thing is, in a lot of these cases, right, the solution, you know, is, you know, we look at like, well, like hindsight's always 2020. If we established all these rules when the dog was younger, before they had all these strongly ingrained habits, things like that, you know, you could really live a very conflict-free life with your dog and have them be unbelievably well behaved and just guide their behavior as it arises, right? And, you know, us as trainers, like let's say I get a dog in for a board and train, right? I don't, you know, this dog doesn't have any associations of me or what I'm going to allow them to do or not allow them to do. So I'm basically starting green with them again. Or you as the new person coming into the house doing your sales pitches, right, for the encyclopedias. That dog has no prior associations of you. So immediately they realize you're different, right? You're not fighting any of these habits, right?
But yeah, I call it the dog daddy advantage. You know how dog daddy blows people's minds because he takes these dogs from people and the dog calms down in like 2 seconds?
Yeah, that's the immediate association, right? Like they have no association.
It's not a magic trick. They just don't know him.
Yes.
He doesn't have any baggage with that dog like the owner does.
Exactly, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at with this is, you know, to a lot of owners that would listen to this, they would think, oh my God, like, you know, it sounds so easy. When you put some of this stuff into practice, though, you know, once this stuff becomes habitualized to the dog of how they behave around the owner, you could start to make these shifts, but you're not going to see as dramatic or as fast of results with things, right? And in some cases, like the dog will still continue to push you around even with some of these changes, right? So when you're dealing with a dog that has these really strong bad associations with the owners, you know, what sort of complications do you see on the route of working through this stuff?
Well, let's give the owners some hope. Let's explain to them that dogs don't live in the past. They are very habit forming and very, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Routine. They're very routine oriented. They get into a routine. But the fact is, if we train the human, which is what we need to train, and change the human, then the dog is going to change quickly. It's not going to, you know, live in the past or be impossible to get past that issue you're having. But that's the hard part. Of course, most humans don't want to change. You know, they're lazy or they're busy or they think they know it all. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
I have a different perspective because even though in my opinion, I've always been working with pet dogs for the last 50 years, even though I wasn't always a dog trainer.
Sure.
Because most of the time when I was in dog training, I was doing in-home sales. I only did the encyclopedias for a few years, but I also did lots of other in-home sales. So I see something you guys don't see as dog trainers, especially successful dog trainers that have lots of customers. You're seeing the portion of the population that's coming to a dog trainer.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different than most of the population.
Ah, that's a very interesting perspective.
Most of the population doesn't think they need a dog trainer.
Yeah.
You and I would certainly think they need a dog trainer when we would see how awful their situation with their dog is, but they think that's just the way their dog is, and they're just going to live with it. They're not going to take it to the shelter. Most people won't, luckily. They're not going to hire a dog trainer. They're just going to live with it.
Yeah.
And you know, I could, you know, it's sad. I could give so many examples, but
yeah. So elaborate on that perspective though, right? Seeing the clients that aren't hiring dog trainers and are just either okay with the dog's behavior or just don't think that there's any chance of it changing or whatever it may be. How does that shift the way you look at working with your clients?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so seeing that, right? Seeing the people that are not hiring the dog trainer, right? How does that perspective shift the way you either look at or work with your actual clients that are hiring you?
Well, it doesn't really change the way I work with my clients, but it just makes me realize that we're living in this, you know, again, I call it the pet industrial complex. It's a combination of dog trainers, veterinarians, Big Dog Food, the three big companies that own all the dog food brands.
Yeah.
The shelter rescue, big retail shelter rescue systems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's PETA, SPCA, Humane Society.
Sure.
None of these people really want anything to change because they're all making a whole lot of money the way things are.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so they're never going to change. It's like it's depressing when you look at the big picture.
Yeah.
As far as dogs are concerned, the dogs suffer, and these people make a lot of money, and nothing ever changes. But as far as someone who is coming to me or hiring a dog trainer to get some help, what I would do is basically just an investigation of what is your life like? What did you do with your dog now? What can we change without freaking you out too much or going too far to where you're just going to give up and get rid of the dog?
Yeah.
What's realistic besides the obedient training? What's realistic that we can change, whether it's how much you walk the dog, whether it's learning how to be calm and teaching your dog to be calm instead of always just affection.
Yeah.
There's lots of things, I think, to give people hope. And I think this is where, whether it be, that Zach George guy or this Robert fellow that you were going to talk to.
Sure.
When they attack somebody like the dog daddy or somebody like yourself, they miss the point that what the dog daddy does is he gives people hope because they see that the dog doesn't have to be the way they've always seen it.
Sure. I agree with that.
In fact, I was watching one of his seminars yesterday that he just did in New Jersey.
Yeah, I saw that. Mm-hmm.
And there were two great moments in that seminar. One was where the guy said, when Dog Daddy said, your face is full of fear, the guy with the livestock guardians, the big dogs.
Yep.
And the guy said, yeah, but it's not fear for me. I'm afraid for you. Mm-hmm. And he didn't understand. I don't even know if Dog Daddy did a good job of explaining it to him. But the guy didn't understand. It doesn't matter why you're afraid. The dog doesn't care why you're afraid. He just knows you're afraid.
Sure.
So you're not calm and confident. That's all the dog knows is that something's wrong because my owner is not calm and confident.
Yeah.
So the other great teaching moment in that seminar was the lady. Remember the lady that told him, this dog is very dominant, very alpha?
I didn't actually watch the video. I just saw he posted it. So.
Oh, okay. Well, if you watch it, it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. So Dog Daddy takes the dog away, and in 2 seconds, you can see this is the opposite of a dominant dog. This is a very, very not dominant dog. Yes. It was kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I would, even though I may not agree with all of their techniques or I don't think any two dog trainers ever agree on anything.
Sure.
Or everything. We agree on most things, but we don't agree on everything. Everybody's going to have their little preferences.
Sure.
But just the fact that he shows people that this dog doesn't have to be like this.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of it's, like you said, just because it's with a new person.
Sure.
And that kind of freaks them out, so they're going to kind of chill out just because, like, well, who's this guy?
Yeah.
But then he starts training the human, which is where I'm coming from. That's what we need to do. Yeah. We need to stop selling the lie of convenience that, dogs are convenient. You don't have to know much. You don't have to do anything but just love them and give them kibble and they'll be good.
Yep. Yeah.
If I was king of the world for a day, what I would tell people is most people should not have a dog.
Yeah.
That would not be very popular because then all of us would stop making so much money, whether it be dog food companies or dog trainers, we'd all be, or half of us would go out of business.
Yep.
But the fact is, most people are not capable or willing to meet a dog's needs, so why should they get one?
Sure. Yeah.
That's not a popular thing to say as a dog trainer.
Yeah, it's not, right? And I would like to dive into that topic a little bit because...
Sure, it's my favorite topic.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because on one end of the spectrum, I would probably agree that a lot of the dogs that come into our facility, it's like I look at the situation and I'm just like, damn, like, whether it's the environment that they live in or the temperament of the owners or the temperament of the dog or the breed of the dog that they got, like it's a bad combination. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got your work cut out for you. You realize it right away.
Yeah, right. It's a bad combination. It's like this is going to take a lot of finagling in order to make this.
But you're Miracle Canine, so you can work miracles.
Yeah, right. So we'll see that a lot, right? And
a good name for a dog trainer.
The easy answer to that would be, yeah, like you probably just shouldn't own this dog, right? Or you're probably not ready to own a dog yet. And, you know, that's the easy answer of like, okay, cool. Like, let's say emotions were out of the equation, right? They were like, oh, okay, you're right. I probably shouldn't have this dog. And then the dog goes to somebody else and they don't have the dog anymore. And then the dog lives with, you know, Rich or David or freaking Josh here, and the dog is living fine and being fulfilled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Right.
But then the other end of the spectrum is I see those situations over and over again, right? And with a little bit of adjusting and getting the dog to meet the owner a little bit, you know, kind of meet them halfway, and the owner to meet the dog, you know, halfway, and figuring out some routines and systems that are going to work in order to provide maybe not, again, the perfect life for the dog, but a life where the dog isn't constantly stressed out and is getting fulfilled, and they could do more things with them, and the owner enjoys the dog enjoys the owner. I just see over and
absolutely.
over.
I think, let me interrupt for a quick second.
Yeah.
I think a big hurdle is just a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Once you give them a little bit of hope,
Yes.
a lot of owners actually start getting more motivated when they see it's actually going to work.
100%.
That's the key.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess then, you know, getting back to the hope side of things, like, you know, I look at it from the lens of, yeah, with some guidance from a professional, right? Or with some guidance via, you know, getting hope through YouTube videos and learning stuff by watching your videos, my videos, stuff like that, that they actually can change a little bit, the dog can change a little bit, and they can live a great life. So, you know, I guess from that end of the spectrum, the conversation of like a lot of these people just shouldn't have dogs has always kind of just rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Does that make sense?
Well, let me extrapolate on that a little bit, which is when I'm talking about that, I'm not really mainly talking about the people that are hiring dog trainers, because those people are showing that they actually care enough or realize that something's not right, and they're looking for help. And I applaud those people, and many of them are going to end up much better off if they get a decent dog trainer.
Yeah.
But again, I'm talking to because I have this different perspective than dog trainers who.
Yeah.
Because all you see as a dog trainer is all these people that are hiring you. These are better people than the people who are not hiring you.
Yeah.
Because most people, and I could just, you know, by the way, I don't tell anybody in my neighborhood I'm a dog trainer because I don't want them to know.
Yeah, sure.
But I could just go through my neighborhood and point out all these people that are never going to hire a dog trainer, and their dog is absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
And it's very poorly behaved, because they've driven it crazy.
Sure.
And that's what I'm really talking about, is that, you know, we need to somehow get more information out, because the pet industrial complex, as I call it, it really feeds on ignorance.
Yeah.
And, you know, you saw with COVID, all these people that had never had a dog went out and got a dog. And it's like they thought they were getting a stuffed animal.
Yeah.
They had no idea that it had any needs at all. I had a client recently, and they started telling me what they'd done, and I'm like you said, I'm like, holy cow, boy, I got my work cut out for me now. I'm going to need to work a miracle here, because, you know, I mean, we even have the puppy mill stores are very prevalent here in Florida.
Yeah.
People are still buying dogs from puppy mills, from pet stores.
Yep.
And if they do that, the dog's pretty doomed, because that shows that they know nothing.
Yeah.
About, I mean, I knew 30 years ago not to do that. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So
I
then
just want to point out that, you know, I'm not picking on the people who are hiring dog trainers, because they're doing the right thing, and they're probably a step above all these people that don't even look for help.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying with that. So even the people that don't hire the dog trainer, do you think that in their mind they feel like they're providing a good life for their dog?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. This has haunted me it's been a few years, but I still remember this one dog. This is when I was still doing in-home sales. I'm about to retire from that and hopefully do this off-grid dog thing full-time pretty soon.
Nice.
And I went in this lady's house. It had nothing to do with her dog. I was just there for the product construction job we were selling. And she had a greyhound, sweetest dog in the world. And the whole time I was in there talking to her, this greyhound was bouncing up and down like a pogo stick, not jumping on me or anybody, not jumping on anything, just bouncing straight up and down. And it was so sad. I started asking her questions. How much do you walk your dog? Well, I don't walk the dog at all. She's too difficult. We just let her out in the backyard. And, you know, I forgot, what was the question? I'm sorry, I'm getting senile.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was just asking, like, if you think that those people think they're providing a good life for their dog.
Yeah, absolutely. It occurred to me, she had this dog for 9 years, and she had no idea there was anything wrong. She thought it was absolutely, that was just the way her dog was, that it was just jumping up and down. Like, it'd be like if you went to an insane asylum and the guy was sitting there beating his head against the wall, just methodically hitting his head against the wall. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen. And she had no idea there was a problem. She wasn't going to hire a dog trainer or change it. She'd been living with that dog like that for 9 years. She loved the dog. The dog, I'm sure the dog loves her. That's not the problem, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are the people that distress me, is that they don't know any better. They just think that this is the way their dog is. And they see their friends' dogs misbehave, so they think it's just the way dogs are. They just misbehave. You know?
Yeah. No, that's a...
No, they've actually been getting very good at living with humans for thousands of years. We just forgot how to live with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And, you know, even a lot of that behavior in particular, right, or a lot of the things that dogs will do that we equate to just being quirky or cute or funny or whatever it may be are really signs the dog's giving you that they're neurotic, right? They're in distress, right? They're frantic, you know?
Really sad.
And if you look at, like, when you're in a state of, you know, neuroticism, like if I'm really frantic or anxious about something, you think about, like, how awful that makes you feel, and then just, like, take that emotion and just put it on the dog and just assume that they are feeling that exact same way as well. And it's tough to get out of, right? So yeah, I guess then that makes sense. You know, clarifying not the people that are looking for trainers, but the people that are, you know, not looking to improve their situation. Because nothing frustrates me more than when I see in the industry, you know, trainers talking about owners that are hiring them for help, right? Or calling them for help. And listen, they might be doing everything wrong. I might be able to look at their entire situation and be like, this is a disaster, right? But they've actively made the step knowing something.
I'm not turning anybody away.
Yeah.
If they're asking for help, I'm going to try to help them for no other reason than the dog's sake, you know?
Exactly.
Even if it just helps a little bit, you know?
So I agree with you. So let's do this. Let's look at the side.
And that's also, I think, that's an escape clause, or you know, the force-free folks will say that a lot because it's their way of getting out of the fact that they can't help the person.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think I see it more in the balance community, though. I think I see it more with balance trainers that like to talk about how, like, wow, this is just a terrible owner. They're doing everything wrong, blah, 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 you know?
Oh, really? They do it as much, too?
I think it's
even more.
I think it's just, it's probably just a sign of incompetence just in general as a trainer. And listen, I'm the first to admit, just like, you know, I'm sure you and many others think, is that there's so many issues with, you know, trainers in the balance community having no understanding of a lot of these types of things we're talking about, right? So... Okay, so let's look at, you know, you get a new client that comes in, getting back to, like, associations and how, you know, this can be very challenging for people to get past sometimes, you know, making the adjustments they need to make, getting the dog to make the adjustments, et cetera, you know, and it's session number 1, you know, it's a totally out of control situation. What are some of the first things that you look at? Like, you sit down for that first hour with them, you know, what sorts of immediate adjustments are you going to have them make to start gaining back some kind of control over their house and you know, getting themselves in a better position with their dog?
Sure, yeah, well, that's going to be different every time. That's where you want to really go into a deep dive on, you know, who are they, what's their lifestyle, who is this dog, how long, you know, is this a dog they got as a puppy, is this a rescue? Yeah. Is it neutered, is it, you know, how old is it? And just generally find out what are they doing with the dog now. And then what realistic ways can I tweak maybe their lifestyle a little bit that's going to help them with their relationship with their dog. But it's pretty easy in most cases to be a big help because most of these people are doing so many things wrong And again, you don't have to fix everything perfectly because the dogs are very forgiving. If you just get it going halfway back in the right direction, they're going to see a huge difference in their dog.
Yeah. Are there any like commonalities you see frequently where it's like, you know, pretty consistently session one, these are 2 adjustments I'm needing to make, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, what we were talking about earlier, that layered stress model.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look at health, because the first thing is, you know, is the dog got a physical issue?
Yeah.
Like like that's not going to really happen in our household, because my wife spends an hour a day brushing my dog, and she's familiar with every inch of his body. So if he gets a pimple he didn't have yesterday, she's going to notice it.
Yeah.
But most people don't massage their dogs, and they're not going to even be aware if the dog's got something bothering him. And maybe, you know, he bit somebody because he's in pain. But then once you get past the physical, then you're going to go into the lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, what are you doing for this particular breed that's breed specific to help him enjoy life? You know, is he getting enough exercise, both mental and physical? And then usually one of the obvious things is the clarity, number 3, which is helping the owner communicate better with their dog, so the dog knows what the heck he's asking for, you know, what he's supposed to do.
And with the clarity, like what are some of your first steps to reestablishing clarity?
Well, I'll just sort of like, a lot of times I'll just have the owner walk the dog and see, you know, what they're doing, and then you'll see all sorts of things they're doing wrong.
Yep.
The biggest thing you see is that they use the leash to try to control the dog.
Yep.
And thank God I don't do that, because my dog is about 5 times stronger than I am, and
Sure.
he'd be controlling me.
Yep.
You got to use the leash to communicate with the dog, because it's much easier than trying to teach him to speak English. You know, you can just very subtle things. Like when I was talking about when I would take Taboo through Home Depot and let him walk out ahead of me just to kind of have fun and freak people out. If I see something coming down the aisle and he's 20 feet ahead of me, I can just barely move the leash a little bit over to the right, and he'll feel that on his shoulder, and he'll it's like I can steer him.
Yep.
With, you know, no pressure, no control over him. Just because he feels me pushing the leash handle in this direction, he'll veer over there and let the person pass by on the left. But yeah, you'll see all the mistakes people are making, and then you'll figure out, okay, these are the ones that I can easily teach them how to correct, and then they'll see an improvement, and then they'll get that hope, and then maybe we'll make some headway.
Yeah. And do you use any sort of training tools? I think you mentioned in that one comment, like, you're not opposed to obviously prongs and e-collars and stuff, but do you use them yourself much?
Not nearly as much as you guys. I'm not against any of those tools at all. In fact, I think in some instances they're fantastic and almost the only, or by far the best solution. But yeah, I'll see what the pet owner's using, and then I'll usually, you know, of course, most of them have a harness.
Yep.
Which is why they're coming to us. It's pretty funny how they sell those harnesses. And then just depending on the dog and the situation, but I like slip leads. I like I'll even use drawing a blank. What's that color called?
Like a
I use it all the time.
or a martingale or
martingale. I like martingales. But a prong on certain dogs, I think is definitely awesome. And I wouldn't use an e-collar that much, except for like a dire situation to interrupt the dog's brain, or to, I would definitely use it to solid up, like off leash stuff. But I think a lot of people use them way too much, and it's more of a suppression thing. Whereas I'm more about, let's not suppress the behavior. And this is the one thing I do agree on with that Robert Hines guy that
sure.
you were going to talk with. By the way, he'd be an interesting guest. because he's basically questioning the whole
Yeah.
quadrant thing and Skinner and all that.
Yeah.
But he should actually go on with Ivan and talk about that, I think. But you know, Ivan likes to get into all the science a lot.
Yeah.
But what was I talking about?
You were saying the e-collars. You think you're not a big fan because you think people use them too much.
Oh yeah, I was saying I try to avoid the suppression as much as I can and go more with the figure out what's causing the behavior we don't want.
Yeah.
And actually address the cause, the root cause, instead of leaving the root cause there, and the dog's always going to be in that bad state that's causing the bad behavior, but we're just going to suppress it by, you know, making it so aversive for him to do that behavior.
Yeah.
So I try to take a holistic approach, right? I do all of the above. I'll still do correction. I'm absolutely for correcting dogs because it's biology.
Sure.
Whether you call it Mother Nature or whatever you want to call it, all you have to do is watch some dogs.
Yeah.
And that's how they learn. That's how they communicate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, through correction. So anybody who's against corrections is a little cuckoo.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you get into like the suppression and stuff like that, I think, you know, the way I've always looked at it is you can get the best of both worlds sometimes, you know, like in many cases, you know, we could look at the underlying reason of why the dog is rehearsing the behavior. And I think that's very important, particularly when you're dealing with like emotionally charged behaviors, right? So, you know, something that the dog is doing because they're fearful, anxious, right? They're in some sort of very high elevated emotional state of mind. Obviously, suppression by itself, you're going to be constantly fighting that very, very strong urge for them to want to do it, right?
Absolutely.
You know, in those cases, it's like, okay, well, maybe we could teach the dog, all right, I know you're stressed right now, but you're still not allowed to rehearse A, B, C, or D. We're going to suppress that a little bit. But let's also look at why you're stressed, why you're anxious, and decrease that a little bit as well, getting to your layered stress model of if we could bring that down a couple of notches on the spectrum, you're going to be less likely to want to rehearse that behavior in the first place. I guess my issue in a lot of cases with people who preach, we only try to address the underlying behavior, right? And we don't add in any sort of suppression to the behavior they're rehearsing, is that, you know, let's look at like fear or anxiety, right? In a perfect world, we would get a dog, you know, and, you know, have them live this life of never being fearful or never being anxious and never wanting to rehearse those things. But I've always viewed that as just not real life. Like, there's going to be things that stress the dog out, right? There's going to be things that, you know, make them uncomfortable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like, let's say your dog gets, you know, mildly stressed when people come over, and their default when they get mildly stressed is they try to maul that person. It's like, well, you know, yes, I want to help them not be stressed in that situation, right? But at the same time, it's like, you know, you mauling this person because you're mildly stressed when they come over is also not an appropriate response for you to have in that situation. You know what I mean? So I try to look at things where it's like, you know, is this a reasonable response, you know, like to your stress, or a reasonable response to your fear, or is it completely unreasonable? And that will dictate my approach of how firmly I lay into some of the suppression of the behavior while simultaneously looking at the underlying cause. But then you have other behavioral issues like, you know, jumping up and getting food off the counter, right? Like, obviously, the underlying reason of why they're jumping up and getting food on the counter is because there's food up there, right? They want to get the food, and they've probably successfully been able to get the food a handful.
I can give you some other reasons.
Yeah, let's get into them.
That's going to get real deep into the weeds.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, back to before I go to that, the other thing you were saying, when they maul somebody.
Sure.
And I would agree that I'm absolutely going to, and I'm always going to use a correction anyway, just to interrupt the behavior pattern or the habit, or, you know, let them know that's not acceptable anymore. But I'm also going to
now
focus more on training the human.
Real quick, so you just mentioned, obviously, you're going to use a correction, obviously, right there in order to interrupt the behavior pattern. Do you view that as a form of suppression?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
What I'm saying is I don't think that we should just do suppression.
Sure.
When it's the reason the dog feels like he has to attack the intruder,
sure,
or the friend coming over, is because of the way that human has lived with that dog.
Yes. Sure. I think
so. That's what I'm going to try to change.
Yes.
But I'm absolutely going to use.
Sure.
and teach the human how to use corrections and,
Yes.
and everything else.
Yeah,
But I'm also going to address the
agree
fact
there.
that the dog needs leadership, he needs structure, he needs to feel. And here's how you can, you got your softer dog owners, the ones, I don't want to hurt his feelings, or I don't want to correct them or whatever. The way I sell that is I explain to them, well, what you're doing now is you're making your dog feel very insecure.
Sure.
You're causing your dog to live in insecurity and fear all the time. So you can guilt trip them into, okay, so maybe it's okay to fix this.
Yep.
But, and those are the people that generally give the least leadership. So that's why the dog's
Sure.
where he is anyway. So I'm going to try to work on that. And it's how realistic is that? It's going to vary from person to person.
Yep.
What they're capable and what they're willing to do. Because most people are not calm, confident people. They're not natural leaders, most people.
Yep.
But you can teach them to be a better leader for their dog. And it makes a big difference, if they're willing to do it. And the great thing about dogs is they can fix us.
Yep.
Like when I get upset and I'm yelling at the TV because I'm watching politics, my dog will come over and be like, "Hey, dude,
yeah,
what's up? Are you okay? Chill out. Is everything okay?" He'll remind me that I'm starting to lose it.
Sure.
But this, like grabbing food off the table, that's a combination of your dog's not respecting the household because you didn't set any boundaries or any structure or leadership. Also, it's a lot of these dogs are starving to death all the time, even though they're overweight, because they're free feeding them kibble.
Yeah.
So they're eating too much kibble, but the kibble's got zero nutrition in it that the dog needs. So the dog knows that he's still hungry, even though he's overweight and overeating. He knows his body's not getting what it needs, so he's trying to grab your T-bone steak off the counter. Whereas, like, my dog has never had any interest in any of our food. And if you tried to hand him human cooked food or kibble or anything, he'd just turn his nose. He'd go like, "Ooh, that's not food. I don't want that.
Yeah.
Where's my good raw stuff?"
Don't you see that as just called a personality trait of dogs? Like, I know, like, for example, like my ex-girlfriend's dog, I used to joke all the time that this was the dog that you could leave a freaking pizza out on the coffee table and he's not going to touch it if you leave the house for 8 hours, and he was on the same diets and feeding routines and training routines and all that kind of stuff as all of our other dogs. But my other two are food psychopaths. Like they'll eat anything that's put in front of them forever and ever for a day at a time. You know what I mean? So don't you think that's
well? Again,
more
it's a holistic approach because it's going to be different with every case, and you can only do what you can do. But if you're starting out with a puppy and you do this stuff right from the start,
sure,
you're sort of eliminating a lot of the pitfalls that can happen.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Doesn't mean that everything's going to ever be perfect. Nothing ever is. But it's going to be very easy to live with. You're going to have a very fun life with your dog because there's no stress.
Yeah, I'm more so.
I take my dog everywhere.
Yeah.
And like I was out the other day and somebody, a Great Pyrenees, we have one too.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day here in Florida out on the patio of the restaurant. I'm like, well, where is he? Oh, he's at home. Oh, that's a shame. Why didn't you bring him with you? Well, he doesn't behave well. Well, how can he when he gets no practice? You never take him anywhere. So, my dog wasn't good at going places the first time I took him someplace.
Yeah. I'm more so referring to just the point you made about, a lot of the dogs looking for further like nutrition and stuff like that through the counter thing. Like I'm sure there's an extent of that of we could just call it like, a lot of dogs, if they're fed an appropriate amount of food, they're going to be kind of a little bit hungry at all times, which means that they're going to be scavenging to some extent, right? Like,
no, not all dogs.
You don't think so?
Not if they're nutritionally fulfilled. And again, you're right. It'll vary from dog to personality to dog, from dog to dog. But I believe if your dog is not, basically starving to death as you overfeed him, which is what most people in this country are doing, he's not desperate for nutrition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, but it's also the whole structure respecting. You're not allowed on my counter. Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? Or my sofa or whatever you don't want them on.
That I would completely agree with, which is it's more of an underlying thing of like, you know, we call it the I think I heard somebody say it's like the whack-a-mole effect. I think Jeff Gellman said that or something like that. As you start gaining back control over your house, it's like, let's say you start setting boundaries with rooms they're allowed in. You start allowing boundaries with who they're allowed to jump on, you know, what furniture they're allowed to get on, stuff like that. You know, interestingly enough, like other things that were behavioral issues start just kind of dissipating, you know, without actively addressing them. Like, let's say you have 5 behavioral issues and you address the first 2, and then the other 3 just kind of go away, because it is an overall respect of the house and respect of you thing, as far as why do they feel entitled to just take whatever it is that they want, right?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in that. And it's a snowball effect either way. If you're doing everything wrong, then it gets harder and everything gets worse and worse. And if you're doing you don't have to do everything right, but if you're doing several things right or most things right, the dog will meet you halfway and you'll have a really good dog.
Yeah, I agree with you. So then, getting back to the original thing that kind of sparked that conversation, like let's say we take off for a second you know, they're looking for further nutrition, which I'm not disagreeing with it necessarily, but I think that there's better examples of why the dog would do it in general, that would, you know, be more consistent across the board, right?
Yeah, well, that's just another added thing. That's not the main reason. The main reason is, like you said, the lack of respect and, hey, I'm just a curious dog. I want to see what this is.
Yes, right. But if you look at that individual one, they're still accessing that food on the counter, and their motivation behind wanting to do it, right, is going to be the fact that there's food on the counter that they want, and they're going to get that food, right? Now, the underlying reasons of why they would feel inclined to not do it would be obviously the rules that we set overall in the house, the fact that they realize that the handler is going to hold them accountable for their behavior, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, the way that we're going to get the dog to not rehearse that behavior is not going to be necessarily fixing the quote unquote underlying problem, because the underlying problem at its core of that specific behavior is still them getting the food off of the counter, right? So in that example, you'd be relying solely on the suppression.
Respect issue.
Yes, but this is where we get into the relationship conversation, which was the original comment that you left, right? Relationship, I feel like, especially when you get into respect and stuff like that, ultimately is going to be coming from a place of the rules and boundaries you're setting and enforcing, right?
Partly. It's more complex than just that. It's you know, it's an overall, I like to use the word holistic because it encompasses everything.
Sure.
So, like, there's a lot of different ways to get respect and lose respect, but that's one way, which is enforcing the rules, of course. That's not the only way. And one of the ways the best and most important way to get respect from your dog is you have to respect the dog. He has to get respect from you.
Sure.
Same thing with trust. You know, people say, I can't trust my dog. You know, well, he's never going to trust you if you can't trust him. So you have to give them the opportunity to fail,
so that we could guide their behavior through the rules we enforce, right?
Right.
So then it gets back to still, you know, like the trust thing back and forth, that still gets to the overarching thing of the rules and boundaries that we're enforcing ultimately with our dog that then put us in a position to trust the dog. Because what you're saying is, like, we have to put the dog in a position to fail. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. You got to put the dog in a position to fail so we could guide their choice and then have them establish better choices, right? So really,
yeah, it's like that person that won't take their dog for a walk because he's hard to walk.
So what I'm getting at here, though, right, is
he's not good at it because you never practice. You have to practice to get good at something.
Sure. Yeah. So the trust side of things, the way that I look at it then, right, you said obviously we have to trust the dog, but obviously how can we trust the dog if the dog is consistently proven to us that they make bad choices? Well, then the solution is we put the dog in a position to make those bad choices so we could guide their behavior better, right? Which isn't, in my eyes, isn't trusting the dog, right? That's trusting my abilities that I have, that I can guide the dog's behavior when they make improper choices. Then, as I establish that the dog is making better choices because I've guided their behavior better, then I could start to trust the dog ultimately. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like I said, that's one of the important ways, but there's lots of ways. Like, one of the best ways to build trust with a dog is to be consistent.
Sure.
How many of your customers are consistent with their dogs when they come to you.
Sure. No, I agree with you completely with that.
So the dog has no idea. He's like, this guy's a flake. 1 minute he says one thing, the next minute he says the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're inconsistent, your dog can't trust you.
Your dog can't trust. Well, okay, yeah, sure. So obviously, we earn that trust by being consistent, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And consistency comes down to consistent rules and boundaries that we consistently enforce, right?
Another way you earn his trust is what very few people do is, practice being calm.
Sure.
Because it's true what some people say that dogs follow calm, confident energy. It's so easily illustrated, you can see it. I once saw a video that was amazing. I don't know if you've ever seen this. I think I might have found it on. Don't hold me to this, but you're familiar with Learberg?
Yeah.
I think I might have found it on Learberg, but it was just a short video of 8 or 9 Malinois puppies, and what they did was they were like 8, 9 weeks old. They were very young puppies. But they were already establishing different personalities among the litter. And they took like 3 of the puppies and they put a high value, like a bone with some meat on it, in with them. And so they were fighting over it. And this one female puppy, I think, was more aggressive than the other 2. And she was growling and attacking the other puppies when they would try to get it away from her. And she was possessing it. And then they put like 3 more puppies into the little room or whatever it was. And it ended up getting stolen by another puppy, got the bone away from her. And then finally they put all 8 or 9 of the puppies in there. And this other puppy ended up with the bone. And he didn't growl when the other puppies would come up to him. He didn't even look at them. He was totally calm. He was the, dominant, the alpha, whatever you want to call it. But he already at 8 or 9 weeks of age had that energy that all these other puppies respected. And again, we as humans are not always calm and confident people. Some people are. Some people are natural alphas. My dad didn't know anything about dog training. Guess what? He had no problems with his dogs.
Yep.
Our dogs didn't mess with my dad.
Yeah. So the calm, confident energy thing is interesting also, right? Or I think you mentioned at some point a little while ago, the fear. You said in the Dog Daddy video, you said, I see the fear on your face or whatever it may be, right? And I've always looked at that's another one I think I have probably a unpopular opinion on, which is I don't necessarily think dogs will have this innate sense of you're nervous or you're scared or whatever it may be. I think it's much more that when we get nervous, when we get fearful, when we get anxious with our dogs, or we get frustrated, you get you're raising your voice, yelling, stuff like that, right? It's not that that's inherently wrong, I think. I think the problem is that when we get fearful, when we get anxious, when we get frustrated, we tend to let that cloud our judgment of the things we're doing and we lose clarity from it. You know what I'm saying?
I would agree with you there, but I would also say that dogs absolutely react differently if you're calm. For example, you'll see all the people walking by with their dog, yelling, sit, 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 and the dog's not, or the dog's barking, they don't want to bark, they start yelling at the dog, stop, stop, stop. And, the dog is thinking, oh, we're both barking, great, let's bark some more. I've never had a problem with my Great Pyrenees with barking because they're known for that. That's why I've read somewhere that they were the most abandoned breed percentage-wise. There's not as many of them as pit bulls or something.
Yeah.
But percentage-wise, people just
that makes sense.
Drop them off. They can't handle them.
Yeah.
They think they're getting a fluffy, big fluffy white dog, and then they can't handle the barking. But what we've always done when he alerts us to a threat, which is what he's doing, what he's supposed to do when he barks, is we've praised him, we've stayed calm, we've acknowledged the threat. We'll, because he doesn't do this constantly. He only does it when there's really something. Because again, he's a balanced dog. He's not out of his mind like a lot of dogs are. But he's not constantly barking, but he does bark when he should bark. And we'll just praise him and say, good job. Okay, I see the threat, and it's over. 2 or 3 barks and he's done. But if you get excited or mad or angry, the dog's not going to respond to you.
Yeah, but don't you think in a lot of those cases, like you use the example of somebody yelling, sit down, this, that, right? And then obviously you haven't had that issue before, right? Don't you think it's because that person in that moment, when they're frustrated and their clarity is shit, right? The things they're asking of the dog and how they're backing up it or reinforcing it are non-existent at that point. So yeah, the dog genuinely sees everything coming out of your mouth as just nonsense, and there's no reason to pay any attention to it because there's no inherent value behind any of it, right? And then, you mentioned the when your dog will sometimes bark out the window, the calmly going over and, acknowledging it and him stopping. It's ironic. We just read on the podcast the other day, we were talking about Jan Fennell's The Dog Listener. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's a book written, I think, in the early 2000s. And she has a lot of very similar views, it sounds like, to you and to a lot of the world of looking at things from like a holistic kind of way, right? And she talks a lot about, solving reactivity when somebody's at the front door and stuff as creating a ritual of, thanking the dog and acknowledging the fact that they saw the threats, and that should inherently be stopping the behavior, right? And
no, see, none of this stuff is going to work on its own.
Yes.
It's not that simple.
Yes.
It's a complex issue, dog behavior, the human-dog relationship, and the bad behavior problems. So if you're doing everything wrong and your dog is completely insane, and your friend comes over, and the dog starts losing it, and you just praise him, he's still going to kill your friend.
I understand. Yep.
You see what I mean?
No, I agree with you, right?
If you don't have these other things in place, then that's not going to work.
Sure. So using your example, right? Because obviously you just explained a situation in which you use it. Like, you have a good relationship with your dog. Obviously, you have respect from your dog.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So why is the sequence of when he starts barking out the window and you go over and you tell him thank you and praise him? Why is that working in that moment? What's going on? What's going on in the dog's head that ritual is what stops his behavior? And one last caveat. Is your goal to stop the behavior in that moment? Is your goal that you want him to stop barking, which is why you do that?
Well, that's a fringe benefit, but my main goal is I want to, give, satisfy, fulfill the dog. I want him to know, hey, good job. You alerted us to there's a guy in our yard. We appreciate that. And here's another thing I do along the same lines. When the Amazon man, because again, this is a Great Pyrenees. You have to adjust this to what kind of dog you have.
Sure.
But this is a livestock guardian, flock guardian. They bark away threats. That's their job, is to bark away wolves and bears, right? So when the Amazon guy comes and drops off a package on our porch, we have a screened-in porch that he'll leave it on. I'll wait until he's had time to get out of the little screened area, and then I'll open the door so Taboo, who's barked at him a few times because you heard him coming on the porch. I'll let Taboo see the guy leaving. As he's barking, he sees the guy's ass walking away toward his truck.
Yeah, bingo.
That is so fulfilling to a Great Pyrenees that, hey, I chased away that threat. That guy left, and I did my job.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing. It takes 2 seconds, but it makes him very happy.
Yep. So this, getting back to the sequence though, barking out the window, I want to get into the weeds of this a little bit, right? So he's barking out the window. Obviously, like I said, you want to let him know, hey, good job. That biologically fulfills him, barking away an intruder, right? Stuff like that. And as an owner, if that's
dogs are supposed to do that. Even any dog is supposed to alert the family or the pack or whatever you want to call it, that, hey, there's a possible threat here. They're just doing, that's why people, when they react the wrong way, they start getting mad and screaming at the dog and telling them to shut up.
Yeah. So again, I always say everybody kind of has their own rules with certain things. Like, we're allowed, let's say that's what he's designed for. That's what we want to allow him to do, obviously, right? So we're going to allow him to do that, right? So your signal in approaching, you're reinforcing, you're letting them know, hey, that was good, you did a good job, right? So, adding reinforcement to that specific behavior.
Because that's the opposite of what people intrinsically think they should do. They think they should tell them not to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it gets back to like what your rule is. Do you want your dog to rehearse that behavior, or do you not want your dog to rehearse that behavior?
Well, there I'd stop you and say, everybody should want their dog to do that, because if you're telling your dog it's not allowed to bark when a stranger knocks on the door, then you shouldn't have a dog. Dogs for thousands, millions of years probably have been, that's what they do.
Sure.
Whether they're out in the wild or in a pack of wolves or whatever. So they're going to alert the pack that, hey, there's something going on here.
Sure.
There's no way I would tell the dog you can't bark. Now, I don't want him barking to where it starts to annoy me and the neighbors.
Exactly.
That's why with our dog, 2 or 3 barks and he's done, and we're very happy with that.
Yeah. Yes, right. So obviously the problem most people have is that it gets excessive. They bark at every freaking thing that goes by, obviously, right? They don't stop barking. They can't get any work done because they might be working from home and the dog is just barking all day long, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? The baby's
frustration, hysteria,
there's a lot of issues that can kind of come with that. So let's say, right, let's say, okay, we're okay with the dog giving us an alert bark, right? For, the right when the person arrives at the door, the package gets delivered.
Yeah, I would hope everybody would be okay with that, right? Just for the dog's sake.
Sure. So we'll say everybody's okay with that, right? But we need it to cut off at a certain point, right? So is your signal, right, or your ritual that you're doing at that point, then you're approaching, you're telling him, good job, that was great, but that signal also means, hey, it's time to stop now. Is that accurate, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've acknowledged it. You don't need to alert us anymore because we see the threat and we're aware of it.
Yeah. So where I've gone with this is when I hear a lot of people talk about and I'm not saying you're saying this because I understand where you're going with it, but when I read like the Dog Listener, or I've seen other YouTube videos of people discussing, a similar philosophy of thanking the dog biologically fulfills them and ultimately shows them that we're now in charge of things and you don't need to take this any further.
And also you're staying calm, so the dog, it's easier for the dog to stay calm.
Sure.
In other words, he sees it, you see it. By the way, you're the leader. This is not going to work if you're not the leader. And you're staying calm instead of like, stop that, stop barking. You're getting mad. The dog, you're just barking too. So, he's barking, I should keep barking. You're both just barking. It doesn't accomplish anything.
You're giving a calm signal that elicits that. That's fine. I like what you did right there. It's time to stop right now. No different than I would give a sit command or a down command or whatever it may be. Right? But my argument has always been that the thank you, or you could walk up to the dog and say watermelon in that moment if you want, right? Because the words obviously are generally irrelevant. The importance is then at that point how we ultimately back up and enforce that boundary if the dog were to not. So let's say your dog, because you've established respect, you don't run into this issue a lot, but I'm sure that at some point over the course of the last however many years you've owned this dog, in that moment, he's at some point been like, well, maybe I want to bark a couple more times, or maybe I don't want to stop at this point, or whatever it may be. And the key thing is probably at that point when he tried to make that decision, because we put him in a position to make that decision, that you've told him, no, you still have to stop right now. Is that accurate?
Not that I recall, but it's possible.
Okay.
It's never been an issue.
Sure.
But then we've never tried to suppress his barking, and we've also got a dog that's now living in massive frustration and hysterical all the time, which you hear all the time. These dogs that bark all day long. It's really sad because you know that they're half crazy.
Yeah.
It's not a normal behavior. It's a totally normal behavior to bark when somebody invades your yard or knocks on your door. But then it should be over with.
Yeah.
It's not normal just to bark all the time every time the wind blows or. Yeah. That's a dog that's living in frustration or not a good place.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't.
But yeah, I mean, if he was doing, I don't know whether that's come up, but if there's ever anything that comes up, I'm going to tell him to no. That's,
Yes.
We're not doing that.
Sure. Yeah, you interrupt it. You tell them, hey, at this point, however it is that you enforce your rules and boundaries, you enforce your rules and boundaries then at that point, right? So,
sure.
So my biggest overall point here, I guess, and the reason why I think this conversation is interesting is because getting back to like, you know, one dog trainer is always going to agree with 90% of the other, but not 10% of the other, et cetera, et cetera. I think the balance I always try to strive is, you know, okay, so I, you know, in my material that I put out for clients do tend to focus a little bit more on the, you know, the individual behavior, not necessarily the whole picture, right? Of like, hey, this is why this dog is rehearsing this individual behavior in this exact moment. And this is how we could both address the underlying cause of that individual behavior, and then obviously, you know, suppress any remaining stuff that we need to. And then obviously with our clients, we get into the weeds of, you know, how they're living with the dog and assessing, like when I walk into your house, like, you know, well, this is not good, this is not good, this is not good. We need to make all of those different adjustments, right? But I mean,
that's why you have a successful business, because you can sell that to the average dog owner.
Yes.
Who just wants to give you money and have you fix his dog.
Yes, yes. But obviously, you know, we wouldn't.
But good on you for, you know, trying to get in some work on the human as well while you're at it.
That's the biggest thing I always tell everybody is,
that's where it's at.
Anybody that has a successful dog training business knows that, you know, like you can only fake it for so long, right? Let's say we were only going in and just playing whack-a-mole and just stopping behaviors, but not addressing the underlying causes. We would consistently be getting shit results. You know what I mean? Like at some point, it's just not going to work, right? And then the owner's going to get right back to where they were before, and et cetera, right? Where, you know, a lot of trainers I see, they focus on the relationship side of things a lot, right? Which is, you know, it sounds like what a lot of your big shtick is as far as when you're working with your clients is focusing.
Well, I try to focus on everything depending on the situation.
Sure.
But what I just feel that, you know, this is what's kind of left out a lot is the human.
Yes.
Because that's hard to sell.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that
they don't want to
change their lifestyle. And most people aren't going to do it.
Yes.
So it's not realistic.
Yeah.
So you have to be realistic, and especially when you're running a business. But the good news is if you get your foot in the door with them and you fix that one thing, then maybe they're going to listen to you on some of the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in many cases when I see people talk a little too much about relationship, though, right? They leave out the fact that relationship is established. Like we could talk very holistically about a lot of these types of things, and all the changes we have to make as a human are very important. But all of those changes, without the understanding that those changes are only really going to work if you have clear boundaries and clear ways to enforce those boundaries, it all eventually kind of goes out the window, and vice versa, right? From my standpoint, if I only focus on here's your boundaries and here's how you enforce your boundaries, but we're not focusing on the relationship side of things, ultimately, long term, you're not going to have all of the results that you're looking to get as well. So I'm trying to kind of bridge that gap here, I suppose, and look at a lot of the things you're saying and say, okay, this is all really, really important information. I don't think there was anything that you said over the course of this podcast that I was like, oh, I disagree with that, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and vice versa. I think we both agree on.
It's all very.
Just be a question of you know, the emphasis. Which one you're going to emphasize more?
Exactly, right? And I think when you get into things, right, that's where it's going to kind of come down to the individual client that you're working with, I suppose, as far as what information they're ready to hear and where, you know? When we're dealing with lots and lots of clients, like you were saying, like, yeah, we do need to kind of sell the results, I should say, you know, of like, hey, this is what your dog is capable of, how Dog Daddy, you know, he highlights, hey, look at your aggressive dog no longer being aggressive, or your anxious dog not being anxious anymore, or any of those types of things. But obviously the bigger picture solution is going to be much, much deeper, but we still got to get them to get their foot in the door. And really what I would like to do, and my goal, I would say, is to reach out to a lot of those people that you were referring to who aren't hiring dog trainers, right? And get them to realize that their life could be so much better with their dog through selling because those people don't want the complex pitch. You try to give them the complex pitch, they're going to be like, fuck you, I don't want any part of it, right?
Yeah,
but if we could sell them a little bit more of like, look, this is the North Star of how amazing your life could be with your dog, and we could get them to get that foot in the door, and then we could kind of ease them into some of those changes that they're going to have to make. Then we could twofold accomplish things. Of one, all the people that already know they need help, they're getting their help, right? We could sell it whatever way we want. They just know that they need help, and they're going to listen to whatever it is that we tell them to do, right? But those other people that, like you were saying, maybe they should currently, because they don't think that either there's hope for their dog or they don't want to put in any work or whatever it may be, we don't necessarily think that they should own dogs. Well, maybe if we catch them early enough with a little bit easier of a sales pitch, we could help more dogs and get less people out of that category and ultimately have our dog world a little bit more thriving of a place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would be my hope, which is why I started Off-Grid Dogs, which is to, one way or another, get information out to people.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, because you're battling this giant money-making machine that wants them to stay ignorant.
Yeah. Very interesting. So Josh, what do you think? You're sitting quiet over there.
I know.
How's it going, Josh?
It's going well. Sorry, I'm just a sponge today.
Soaking up information.
Yeah, but
I need to get my Ed McMahon. You guys old enough to know who Ed McMahon was?
No, probably not.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's the most famous sidekick in the world. That was Johnny Carson's sidekick for
okay.
decades.
Oh, McMahon? Are we talking, is this related to Vince McMahon?
No.
All right.
Different
I think that's his name, Ed McMahon.
Yeah.
You can Google it. He's real famous.
Yeah.
He was with Johnny Carson for probably 30 years or something.
Yeah.
And I need to get a partner or a sidekick or something. I noticed. You ever watch one of Beckman's podcasts?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got
YouTube
a guy.
sits with him.
He's good too. His guy that he has is he's very engaging throughout his podcast episodes as well. Like he contributes quite a bit.
He grows on you. The first one time I watched him, he really annoyed me, but then I got used to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Beckman has been doing a good job with his podcast lately. I've listened to a handful of his episodes. It's interesting. We did a couple of videos just talking about, I have some opinions on his training and some of the things that he does. But I have enjoyed some of his podcast episodes as of late. So
yeah, he's very successful. His podcasts, they actually don't even really talk about dogs that much.
I think that's why I like it. It's
talk about anything.
Yeah.
But he's mastered the algorithm. That's what I need to do. I'm old and dumb, and I never even got on social media until a few months ago. My goal in life was to die without being on any social media. But unfortunately, because of this Off-Grid Dogs thing, I'm going to have to try to learn how to fight the algorithm.
Yeah, it is what it is. The constant game of social media is always a headache. So.
Yeah, trust. Yeah. We're still trying to figure it out too. So
yeah,
they're probably doing better than I am, believe me.
Awesome. Well, listen, Rich, do you have you got anything else you want to add in before we wrap this up?
No, I always enjoy conversating about dogs.
Yeah,
and I think most common sense people can agree on the important stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
A lot of the stuff going on in the dog training world and everything's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I think the best thing about this is, when it's just in the comments, you don't really get to flesh out each side's opinion, and just sitting here,
right.
We've talked for almost 2 hours now, and you can see that there's multitudes more that we agree upon than disagree, and I think that's been our thing for a while, is that we love to see how much we actually have in common, whether it more than the disagreements,
Yeah.
Sure.
Big fan.
And hopefully learn something from each other, because that's what I'm always trying to do, because I don't know everything, but it's just, as you get older, you get a perspective that you didn't have when you were younger.
Yeah.
And I just sort of see the big picture.
Yeah.
And I had a funny idea. You're welcome to steal it from me if you can pull it off. You know what my idea was?
What's that?
To sort of skip ahead from being a nobody to getting this information out big time. This is this is going to be political, so half your audience is going to hate this idea.
All right.
But who's the biggest dog lover you've ever heard of?
Who's that?
Tucker Carlson.
Oh, yeah?
This guy, if you watch any of his interviews where usually when he interviews people, he doesn't talk. He just lets them talk. But when he's actually being interviewed and he's doing the talking, or if he's giving a speech, he's never given a speech in his life without mentioning his dog.
Really?
And he gets it. In fact, I took a 60-second clip of one of his speeches, and I made a short out of it, because he talks about why certain people have well-behaved dogs and other people. He understands it totally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he goes like, hunting and walking with his dogs every day, but I'm thinking that guy gets more followers or viewers than Zach George and Dog Daddy combined times 10.
Oh yeah.
So if I could just get him to interview me for an hour, I could get a lot of information out there
Yeah.
to a lot of people that would otherwise never hear it, you know?
Yeah. Right. You got to pay him in like a lifetime supply of Zyn. I think he's real into that stuff.
Is that nicotine?
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's always talking about how he loves that
Yeah.
Zyn stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an idea. Maybe we can bribe him.
Yeah. Right.
But I don't think we need to. I think if he realized what was going on, and he'd do it because he loves dogs.
Sure.
That guy, you know.
Yeah.
But he understands. He's not the typical dog lover that has no clue.
Sure.
He actually gets it and would understand what we're saying.
Yeah, I like it. Well, like I said, Rich,
So-
I appreciate you being on. So
Thanks
are
for
you,
having me. It was a
you
pleasure.
are you primarily just on YouTube, or are you on other platforms as well?
Yeah. So far, I'm just on YouTube and Facebook, but I haven't even mastered Facebook.
Yeah.
So when I get around to it, because I've been real busy, I'm still not retired yet.
Mhm.
When I get around to it, my next thing would be Instagram, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. Start posting. Put your opinions
Yeah.
out there. I mean, this is like you were saying, these are good messages people need to know. So if you could figure out a way to break it down into really digestible, pieces of information people can grab onto, there shouldn't be any reason why you can't get a little following going pretty quick.